Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guests this week are Amy Nostbakken and Norah Sadava, co-writers and co-stars of Mouthpiece, Patricia Rozema's screen adaptation of their acclaimed Nightwood Theatre stage play. The movie premiered at TIFF last fall, was selected for Canada's Top 10 in December, and is now playing in Toronto at the TIFF Bell Lightbox and in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Monica Film Center. If you haven't seen it, you really ought to. It's terrific. Given the nature of their film, it felt right to ask Amy and Norah to pick a movie together, and they chose Grey Gardens, the 1976 documentary directed by Albert Maysles, David Maysles, Ellen Hoved, and Muffy Meyer that embeds us with Edith Ewing Bouvier Beale and her adult daughter, Edith Bouvier Beale, Big Edie and Little Edie, in their decaying mansion in the Hamptons, where their aristocratic status as cousins to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and their codependent nature have combined to create a kind of toxic seclusion. It's just them and their cats and some raccoons against the world. And then they met the Maysles. You know what happened next. This is Someone Else's Movie.
We picked Grey Gardens because both of us were picking a film. If we were individual, we might pick different things, but together, when we were writing the play, Mouthpiece, actually before the play was called Mouthpiece, when it was just a play about female relationships, and we wanted to try to capture all the different ways, the beauty and the ugliness, the dark and the light of mother, daughter, friends, sisters, lovers, the different kinds of female relationships. We drew on this quite a lot, both for its relationship between the Edies, but also because the way we make theater, we don't lean really heavily on a linear narrative. We look at it more as a crystal, so it's many things. And you see it in this documentary. It's just kind of all at once. And before you know it, you know these women, but nothing's really happened. Yeah. And so we like to approach story creation in that way. And so we kept looking back at how this was made. And we often look at music and cinema rather than other theater when we're writing plays. But this relationship between mother and daughter, it's so extreme. And you kind of can't believe it's a documentary. The characters are so huge, and this like incessant over and over. One wants to leave and the mother won't let her go, but they also need each other. Is so familiar, but it's pushed to this grotesque. You can't believe, and then of course they speak in this kind of romantic, like they're speaking like they're speaking lines from a film or something. Yeah. Even the tone of their voice. Well, I never and I don't know, like I don't know. He's like
just mad about that.
Is the mob? What is it? The fawn. What is it?
The marble fawn is here.
And then she gets right up close to the camera. The marble fawn is whatever she says. It's like he's coming closer. He's taking my books and things. It's like they're writing, or at least Little Edie is writing a drama for herself. I don't know. Anyway, it's extremely theatrical and kind of larger than life, even though it's a documentary.
Yeah, I had forgotten how chaotic it is. Just rewatching it again last night, it's like you're trapped inside of a psychotic episode because they're arguing with each other about things that we have no context for, there's no reference for it. But you're right, the music of their dialogue. I said dialogue, but it's not. It's just
monologues over top of each other.
It's a dueling. It's dueling narcissism. It's the fascinating codependency, and you start to hear in the rhythms of their arguments, you start to hear what they're really trying to say, which I think is basically just pay attention to me. And they both want it and they can't ask for it, so it becomes this endless array of slights and imaginary offenses, and then it gets more complicated with Little Edie clearly trying to come on to David Maysles, which becomes its own
horrifying car crash.
Well, you know, your first instinct as a documentarian is to take yourself out. I mean, it used to be anyway. That was the rule they operated under. They never spoke to the subjects, and it was all verite and direct address occasionally, but they would not be interviewing people on camera. And then you very quickly hear the Maisels, and David's increasingly uncomfortable, and it's like nothing else. Yeah. Well, yeah. When did you two first experience it, and when did you first see it?
I first saw the movie when I was living in New York in my early 20s, and I was passing the IFC.
Okay.
And there was a huge lineup outside of it. And I looked and saw on the marquee, it said Grey Gardens. I'd never heard of it before, but there was this massive line, so I was like, I'll just go see. I love the IFC. I'm just going to go in and watch it. And it ended up being that Albert Maisels was there.
Oh, wow.
And he did a talk afterwards. And I was stunned by the characters. Just the character study alone, even if you don't look at the documentary making and the implication of them being in the film, of the documentary makers being in the film. It's an incredible character study. And I don't remember a lot of what he said afterwards, other than I remember him talking about how bad the house stunk.
Yeah.
And how many times they had to leave to throw up while they were making the documentary. Especially, like, they kept offering them food, and you see it a couple times in the documentary.
The pate and the crackers.
And they offer them to David and Albert, and I think there's a third guy with them sometimes.
Yeah, they had a sound
with a boom operator. And he was talking about how they couldn't say no often, and they would take these things and leave the house and have to throw up what they just ate, because it was just like cat shit and raccoon shit, and you see the bed, it's just like
the corn on the bed. This part is like, I can't.
Unbelievable.
I can't so much. The cats, the newspapers all over the bed, and the cats on the newspapers. And then what's the kid's name who keeps coming over?
Jerry.
The marble fawn, Jerry. He's over there, and Big Edie is cooking corn from the bed
on a little hot,
and it's lying down, and she's got the butter, and it's like, oh wow, yeah. And I think there's something about this incestuousness and this relationship that is, as I said, like, there's something familiar about it, but it's pushed to an extreme. And even the way little Edie, like, it feels, and she even says it, and I feel like a little girl, and mother treats me like I'm a brat, or Big Edie yells from the background, I think you're a little brat or something. Yeah. But she reminds me of myself as a child, and I think a lot of little girls used to put towels over their head, like they had long, or I did anyway, and pretended I have long hair, and she invents these stories, and from under the window, he proposed she keeps repeating like these romantic ideas that may or may not be true, but it reminds, and she sings, and I used to sing like that as a little girl, like out of nowhere, interrupting, and the mother going, sing us a number. It reminds me.
But then when she does sing, she's like, it's horrible, you're a horrible singer. She can actually sing well, she's just not doing it.
And I mean, you see you see it more in the film Mouthpiece than in the play, that these exchanges between mother and daughter, these kind of, like, as Patricia calls it, small crimes of the heart, are present in every mother and daughter relationship. But in this version, it's just pushed, so that little truth is pushed to a extremely compelling and hard to look away kind of. It's almost unreal. You hardly believe it, but it's very, very real for them.
I was watching it just the other night to remind myself, with two friends who'd never seen it before.
Oh, how did that go? They
stopped halfway and were like, this isn't real. These are actors. Like, these can't be real people. And part of it is the way that little Edie speaks. Like, she says the thesis of the movie. It's hard to keep the line between past and present. And that just comes out of her, as if there's a script. But she's so smart. She's so literate. She reads, like, she writes that Robert Frost quote on the wall, and, like, she's considering whether to write that one or the other one. Something like, we come as water and we leave like wind, or maybe it's the opposite or something like that.
No, I think that's right.
And they were they were just having such a hard time believing it wasn't a setup.
Yeah. I mean, she is performing. Right?
Oh, yeah.
She's they're both performing for the camera. It's just Big Edie, I don't think, is aware of it as much.
Yeah.
And it is I cringe when I watch it because these are just, it's like an archaeological find. It's like they stumbled across. I love the setup of those.
Time.
Yeah, the setup of the news articles at the very beginning that sort of puts them in context. Well, they are Jackie Onassis' family, or Jack McBouvier, but they're also recluses, and they've been cast out by society, and everyone is trying to get them to leave. And you know, if you're setting up a comedy or a drama, that's how you start.
Right.
You establish the premise. But for a documentary to just say, we found this little tiny sliver of former wealth, former privilege, and people who've clearly never considered the possibility that this isn't a tenable situation, that they shouldn't be living like this. It started and it never stopped. And so now they're hoarders, and now they have animals running through, and now the raccoons are taking over. And they are conducting themselves with this weird formality and this mid-Atlantic presentation of hauteur. Mm-hmm. I probably mispronounced that. But their refusal to acknowledge that, I mean, it's the definition of insanity, right? If you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, but also the absolute refusal to acknowledge squalor or decline. And it somehow isn't tragic, which is the thing I don't understand.
I find a bit of tragedy.
I mean,
I find, but like I was thinking, if that was made today, I think we'd all have a problem with it. I think we'd feel like two men coming into the house of these women who clearly have some actual mental instability, and flirting with them and staying around and then putting it on camera. I think there's a level of exploitation that at the time, because it's like an archaeological find, it feels okay because it was at a time when the conversation was different. But I think
there was a lot of backlash.
Yeah, for sure.
There was a problem.
But us watching it now, there's less. It's like, wow, look at that. If it was made now, I'd go, I don't want to see that because I find it problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen documentaries like that fairly recently, where, like, advocacy documentaries that are just so committed to telling a specific, or not committed to telling a specific story, but so committed to illuminating a situation that they just steamroll the lives of the people involved in it. And other ones that handle it really, really well and are made with the consent and cooperation even of the family. There's one that came out of Australia. It was at Hot Dogs this year, called In My Blood It Runs, where the filmmaker effectively gave the family she was studying directorial co-credit and gave them cameras and let them shoot stuff. And unfortunately, it doesn't pay off. It's very clear that she was trying to get something that isn't in the film, like of some incident or some moment that just didn't happen. But it's still it's more interesting as a sociological document than it is as a narrative documentary. And Grey Gardens, which has no narrative, I mean, it's when I say it's not a tragedy, I mean that the film never feels like you're supposed to pity them, or it doesn't lean into it. It doesn't tell you how to feel. It just presents this symbiotic, parasitic relationship, this codependency, and it's functional. And somehow, that's the thing that fascinates me, that they aren't institutionalized or arrested or dragged out. They're left there by the community, which clearly has decided it's easier to leave them to their own devices than it is to get in there and interfere. But and they're not sick. They seem to be immune to whatever toxins are in the animals. Because raccoon feces is, like, it's lethal. If you touch that, you have to boil your hand.
She feeds them up in the attic.
The Wonder Bread.
Yes, an entire loaf of Wonder Bread, because they're her friends now.
That, I don't think, is that ever explained? Like, she doesn't say,
no, there's no
here's
setup.
Why or anything. She's just feeding the raccoons.
Yeah, they complain about them at the beginning. She's complaining about the hole. And then at some point, the raccoons just become part of their ecosystem. And I'm assuming they're killing the cats. We just never see it. But it's incomprehensible.
I read an article about, so in the beginning, they have all those news articles about the previous cleanup. And this is the cleaned up state.
Yeah, this is the new...
And in the previous cleanup, someone who witnessed it accounted that there were thousands and thousands of bags of trash removed, including many, many cat corpses.
This is always the way.
Piles of cat corpses. Yeah. So this is like, this version of them living in their house is actually very respectable.
Yeah.
Comparatively. And you see it also when the family comes over.
Yeah, when the family comes over. It's so
uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's... By that point, we're invested enough with the Edies that we're on their side somehow. Yeah. And you just...
Laying down newspapers so they don't sit on the filthy chairs.
Yeah. Which, again, completely reasonable.
That is part of it. You're on their side. You're on Edie's side when she's dancing, for example.
Oh, the thing with the sparklers and the flag.
Yeah. You don't want it. You want it to be good, and you don't want to be embarrassed for her, and you don't want her to be embarrassed. You want it to be okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if it affects, because I think I watch it now knowing, I believe that they were both very happy with the documentary and loved that it was made and loved the fame. And
yeah, Little Edie went on to do her own show on Broadway and was like... so proud of the...
I wonder if that affects that I'm more okay with it. And then I can just... Well, they liked it. They
Right, its legacy is ultimately positive. Nobody sued anybody over it.
Right. They loved it, how they were portrayed.
And they're certainly happy to be in front of the camera. Little Edie is. And it's like clearly all she wants.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she could have been a star.
Yeah.
She could have been a star in New York. I mean, largely, it seems like it's failed glory. The narrative is what's there is that she coulda, woulda.
Right.
The two sort of failed. Well, I guess the Big Edie sort of doesn't admit. She just says she was the happiest thing, and her kids are amazing. And
that's right.
She had the best life. She has nothing to complain about.
But that battle over that's really an interesting part as well as what's true, or who Little Edie claims that her mom pulled her out of New York, and Big Edie denies it for some time. But then there's a part where she does say, "Yeah, I didn't. You were getting wrinkles on your face, and it was time to pull you out." And then the failed engagement or proposal, and all that. It's hard to know what's true.
And Little Edie says, I had to come home because I was sick of worrying about you. I find there's also maybe what is beautiful about it is that there is a lot of love between them, even if it is chaotic and messy. They clearly have this very deep connection that goes beyond what we can understand from the film, because they express beautiful things about each other in these offhand moments. Yeah. Little Edie says at some point something like, she is really great. I hope she doesn't die.
Yes. And Big Edie has the line fairly early on where she says she's been up there for 50 years and she can't bear another summer, but she has no intention of leaving. Like that, she complains about leaving, but clearly this isn't a person who's going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so they each have their own illusions about what's going to happen next in the relationship. And they somehow reinforce each other in subtle ways, in little ways, over and over again. I mean, they clearly, they care for each other, and they are actually caring for each other in a literal sense, because there's no one else. And I mean, it could be 1973, it could be 1943. There's no sense of where or when we are.
It's true.
Yeah, it's been going on forever.
Just a general old-timey cinema language and voice.
And singing. The songs are all
antiquated
in the way she sings.
Yeah. It's that mid-Atlantic, Katharine Hepburn in the Philadelphia Story kind of delivery where everything's very arch, and you pull out your vowels a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's fine. We give no quarter. We give no quarter to anyone who comes by to visit us. The raccoons are lovely this time of year, and
I think that helps a lot. I mean, if it was just a Canadian accent, I don't know. I don't know if
Be
it'd
less
stick.
impression
So, like-
impression would be less
Yeah.
strong.
So something like
Staunch woman.
yes,
Oh my
she
God.
spells
There's
out
nothing
staunch.
worse than a staunch woman.
Staunch.
STAUNCH.
It's like it's like a testimonial somehow. They're constantly defining themselves for the camera and
Yeah.
telling us
Yes.
how to see them and who they are. And I just the extra material on the Blu-ray, it's on the Criterion channel, I think, as well. You can pick through the documentaries if anyone listening wants to do that. It is just this amazing luck of finding something that no one else would have even looked at. I think that's what's so interesting about the
Right.
Maisel's Choice. Salesman is a movie about America, in that way. It's about traveling salesmen and what is now a vanished form of life. But this is sort of exactly the same thing, and it makes sense that they'd be the ones to make it. But just the idea of committing to being in a place with these two women is Herculean. I don't.
And apparently they spent a year before they shot getting to know them before they brought the camera in. So they spent a lot of time.
This confuses and annoys me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, just because the relationship is so transactional, right? I mean,
Right.
Little Edie is so needy by the time we see her that I can only imagine she's calmed down a bit in the year that they
Right.
spent together.
Yeah.
She would have immediately been,
Right.
full
I see.
bore, seeing this as her shot.
Yeah.
That's How do you
And
research
she
something like
zooms in on David so specifically. It's
Yeah,
like
there's no one else in the room.
Yeah.
She always finds his camera.
She comes the
Yeah.
proximity to the camera with him is so it like leaves you feeling a little uncomfortable. She comes
absolutely.
into him.
Yeah, I've never seen it in a theater, actually, now that I think about it. What is that like to see?
It's uncomfortable
Yeah.
because the chaos, the sound of when they're talking over each other, if it's like really big sound, it does make you feel like, get out
Yeah.
of, let me
Yeah.
out of here. There's too much, and like, you feel the filth in you feel their her desperation is pretty visceral.
Mm-hmm.
Comes through.
Oh yeah, I mean you can see it on her skin sometimes. It just
Yeah.
feels like this kind of rosy, desperate, like her heart rate is increasing. You can sort of see it as she blushes and it's just
You can see her getting to moods as well. You see her getting a bit riled up and like in a feisty, cheeky kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And she does, she physically kind of, she's going to do something. When she rips, and then she like rips the photo out of her mom's hand. She
Yeah.
gets in it.
with that big grin.
Yeah.
Because she knows she's doing the wrong. It's like watching a 4-year-old. It's like watching someone who never had to grow up. It makes me wonder what she was like in New York.
Me
was she
too.
that entitled? Was she that?
Well, her mother was still sending her groceries.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling she wasn't extremely
She wasn't successful.
independent.
Yeah. She wasn't looking for. I mean, this is somebody who is constantly seeking an outlet, a way to demonstrate herself, and I recoil from that in real life a lot.
Right.
We've all been to the party where there's that one person who just needs to be the center of attention, and for whatever reason it's not happening, and he or she just tries harder and harder and harder, and Little Edie feels exhausting. But apparently, in that John Waters camp thing, she becomes an inspirational figure for people who've seen the film and feel that they can't be out or open or themselves in public. And so that became a thing in the 70s and 80s. They became, icons and avatars of queer style somehow.
Yeah, there's a lot of drag performances inspired by her.
Which I get. It's the performative thing, right? It's the expression of the true self. But the drag performances seem to find her a lot sweeter and less needy than she seems to be in the film. And it's like they took the wrong message away from her, which enabled her further, which kept her pushing and trying to... I mean, I know the Maisels were the ones who were primarily involved in the HBO adaptation, but the Beals were... I think Little Edie was consulted or something. There's some weird credit about the film that was produced in the the early 2000s, if I've got that right, with Jessica Lange and Drew Barrymore, which it feels like, have you guys seen that? Mm-hmm. It feels like a much softer version of this, because just the fact that, it's that classic thing, it's what Kubrick said about making a war movie. You're going to glamorize it, even if you're trying to make the most horrific anti-war thing possible, just because you're casting movie stars and making it look great. Mm-hmm. And, I know Patricia Rozema wrote that, or co-wrote it. And I'm going to talk to her about that at length, I guarantee it. But it is such a weird transition to have something this outlandish and unbelievable be repackaged into a more palatable version, which is thus only enjoyable by people who are in on the joke already. I think. I may have gone around one too many corners on that. But it's this weird puzzle box of need and despair or repressed despair, because neither of them would ever tell you they're not happy. They'll tell each other constantly, but they won't tell the camera.
They'll blame each other.
Yeah. And then to see it become a zeitgeisty thing and become embraced by part of the culture that they would have nothing to do with themselves, I find that fascinating.
I was talking to my friend who was watching it with me, and she said, my grandmother, she didn't go into a home, and she lived in a house, and sometimes the dog would pee on the carpet, and she didn't have the mobility at that age to find it and clean it up, so we'd come over and the house would smell like dog piss. And the Edies, it feels like it's just pushed just over the line of what something that you or I could know in our families.
Sure, yeah.
It's not that far beyond what is, someone who's trying to just keep going themselves and doesn't have the facilities to kind of make it socially acceptable or comfortable for other people, but they live in their own. Yeah, she said also she used to write all over shoe boxes and whatever she could find, and they would come and find her notes everywhere. And they feel very extreme, but they're actually just kind of a fraction beyond what may be really, really normal. And
it's just what happens without supervision. Yeah, right. Without it's that thing of the expectation that there'll always be a best friend or a niece or somebody who comes by and says, "Oh, this is terrible. Let's clean up." We see it in every movie where you need to see how badly someone's been living. You get the external perspective. Yeah. And here, the movie is the external perspective. The Maisels are the ones commenting on it without saying anything. And this is what happens when you've been steeped in your own habits, I guess, and neither of them cares enough that, what's this? Oh, the cat's going to the bathroom behind my portrait.
At least someone's doing what they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. They're all okay with it. They're weirdly fine with this. But the ammonia, maybe the ammonia keeps the raccoons back. There's got to be some.
And she says at one point, "I like the smell. Keeps me strong." It's what she said, something like Big Edie.
Yeah, it's like smelling salts. It keeps her.
Yeah.
Ugh. I'm sure. You get older, you stop smelling stuff as much, I suppose.
Maybe.
And maybe she's got cataracts and doesn't see how bad things are. But then there's little Edie who's living in this at a different register. She has made the conscious decision to continue this lifestyle, right? She's the one who could leave.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I find it very interesting to examine the relationship of, in this case, it's the mother who says one thing, even in the example of she has a beautiful singing voice. It's more beautiful than mine. And then she sings, and that's awful. Yeah. She keeps singing. That's awful. That's not how it is. No, wrong again. Similarly, she wants her. Why don't you just get married? Why don't you find someone and get married? But then with the other hand says, some sort of insult, or you can never leave me. Mm-hmm. I find this push and pull so fascinating, and it's a refrain that just keeps getting repeated over and over and argued about. It's amazing. Of course this is edited, but that refrain is repeated in every location, in every scene. I wish I could get out of here, and yet she doesn't.
Yeah.
And again, just the fact that it's a documentary, that no one's feeding them the lines, and it doesn't feel like the Edies are aware that this is the underlying theme we're going to pull through this. It's just what's on their mind at all times. I could have been this, and yet not going for it. And this is such a thing. I mean, so many of us have that, regret or if I'd only. But I guess for her, she feels it's too late. She's not jumping for it, or she's just scared. That idea of. Not.
And she does have the responsibility of her mother. It's a real thing.
She's choosing that.
Yeah.
She's choosing to have that responsibility.
Yeah. There's also 2 brothers, and where the hell are they?
Who the big idiot adores, has no problem with the boys.
Yeah, it's funny they don't have as much. Well, it's not funny. It's not. Yeah. You mentioned the editing, and it's absolutely a constructed film. So we're not seeing things. I just assumed that the brothers didn't want to participate for whatever reason, and possibly because they have tried to help and it hasn't worked, or it's easier, or maybe they are still successful and they're the ones feeding them money, and that's what's keeping all of this going, because they don't seem to have a source of income. There's just this strange existence where they own the place, but someone must be paying the property taxes. It's got to be. It's got to be sustained somehow.
And someone's dropping off groceries.
Yeah, which are either, like if there's a benevolent association somewhere that's taking care of these strange people on the fringes, or they have an arrangement with someone that is completely unexplored. Yeah, I mean, how do you handle that when you are someone who is world famous and you have effectively insane relatives who are on the verge of homelessness all the time? Do you support that? Do you do your best to distance themselves? I mean, clearly...
I think, from what it seemed from all those old news articles and things, she did put in an effort when she felt like, it's really getting to the edge.
Yeah.
She also had her own shit going on.
Yeah, no kidding.
So...
The early 70s. And what do you...
Yeah.
And what was the media landscape like then? Because clearly it's like the joke about you win an Oscar and now you know what the first line of your obituary is going to be. No matter what, that's the thing that will define you. So the fact that they are related to Jacqueline Bouvier Campbell Onassis is going to define them, but it's also going to define her. Mm-hmm. And just the sense that they're trying to do this fashionable presentation, or what they think is fashionable to them, or what will appeal to us. Every time I watch it, I'm fascinated by the fact that they thought going in front of cameras was a good idea. Mm-hmm. And that also going in front of the camera was a good idea, because now we know them. Yeah. Narcissism is one of those things that absolutely fascinates and repels me in equal measure. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm a writer. I got into this because I figured whatever I was saying was important enough that it should be published and put out there. So I guess I recognize some of it in myself. But just this sense
that... This is a craft.
I
mean, sure.
But what I think what you're... what I hear is like putting a video of yourself doing something that's unpracticed on YouTube, for example.
Okay, yeah.
This is not practice. They're just they're just allowing themselves, warts and all, to be in front of the camera. And that we see a lot of today, versus 20 years ago, or even fewer years ago. That I find I have to grapple with often. It's not my generation particularly. It's one right after.
Yeah.
Who have no shame and have no problem. You carefully craft and use your skills to write something and then edit it over and then decide to publish it, versus kind of letting everything just...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. There's still a performative aspect, I guess, in what I do. But, what is this? But,
sure,
these conversations are important enough that I'm going to put them into the world.
Right.
But the Beals at least are being mediated. They're working with, consciously or unconsciously, they're working with the Maisels, and this is a study that will be filtered and refined and collapsed into 90 minutes. And I get the feeling they would have been perfectly happy if this had never ended. Yeah, they would be reality stars.
Right.
I think Roger Ebert actually said this. That was his argument, that this was the first example of reality television.
TV.
That's interesting.
Yeah. In that they don't understand the contract, that the ramifications of what they're doing.
It's the thing itself that is
That's
the possibility.
Comparison.
They also are steeped in Hollywood mythology. Like, they're both raised believing that they would be famous for their singing or their modeling or their face or
Soft shoe dancing.
their hands and soft shoe dancing. They're not just everyday people who never had anything to do with being watched. They both were in the spotlight.
She was a model, right?
She was a
The
model,
lady?
yeah. And a singer and a dancer and all the things claims to be, but I think that kind of belief in the fact that they were worth the spotlight wasn't an accident.
I think also they felt they could not do anything else as women in that time.
Sure.
You know, Edie's I went to a certain school because I thought my father would approve of that school, and I took the courses I thought he would approve of.
Yeah.
And then went into dancing and singing. And he had even an opinion on what she wore, hats and things like that. Yelled at her.
Wonder about that
so I mean, there's not much spoken about Mr. Beale, other than he was a wonderful husband and
who mysteriously came with some fake Mexican divorce papers and then married someone else, and verbally abused his daughter.
I believe that. From who the Edies are, I definitely believe it was an unhappy household.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of it too, that they've rebuilt a happier world for themselves now that just no one else can understand
what it was before.
Yeah. They've recreated a domestic reality where the only people yelling at themselves are themselves. Like they have the control over that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they shake it off so easily.
And they definitely, it opens on her, on the lady describing all of, this is the outfit for the day.
That's right.
Because very much against, or everyone else is very much against them. That no one else understands. Even the gardener, she's like, is it okay that he saw my outfit? No, you don't understand. Mm-hmm. They don't know.
In East Hampton, they lynched you for wearing red shoes on a Thursday.
So this is us and them.
It's like the beginning of an F. Scott Fitzgerald.
I know.
Absolutely. And I think she's totally aware of that. She's narrating as though it is the opening of an F. Scott Fitzgerald novel. She's aware of this. Yeah, how she comes off as a character.
But what you were saying about that being the only option for them because they were women does feel like the other part of the sadness to me, is that they were trapped by circumstances. They were both ambitious, smart, talented people at a time where women weren't allowed to do anything.
Yeah, especially if you were in society.
Yeah. And then they got ostracized for being too much to handle. Because they were women with opinions. Mm-hmm. They both have a lot of opinions.
That's what she says.
So
right?
there is a sadness to seeing them so isolated because society at that time wasn't accepting of women with that much color in them. Yeah. And so it spirals into a kind of larger than life thing because they have no one to reflect it off of. But it's sad to me that if they were alive today, they would probably be celebrated or have another opportunity to put their love of literature somewhere and their love of music somewhere.
Yeah, it'd be like a hipster salon thing. People would just come up with you and rant about whatever book they wanted to talk about that week.
Yeah.
I could see that. They would, now, sure, everybody becomes a cultural figure if they persist long enough.
You think so?
If they're present in the landscape long enough, I think so. Yeah.
And if they're extreme enough.
Yeah, if you're big enough and you refuse to go away,
look at the president.
Eventually, well.
And he's the king of doing something wrong and then claiming he didn't do it.
Sure.
And just till his death. Just that he did it the other day with that nasty
woman.
Yeah. Somebody said
it just works.
Yeah, if you don't apologize, if you never acknowledge
just
that.
Lie.
If you can lie your way through it, if you never acknowledge that you're living in a hovel. Yeah. Surrounded by cat urine and raccoon feces, then you're a star. You're a bright shining star.
You know what I was thinking about though? Because I didn't realize there were also 2 female directors. Mm-hmm. There's 4 directors.
Oh,
the Maisels brothers and then 2 women. And I never knew that. And I was like, it's interesting because I read that only the Maisels went in the house. The women didn't.
So were they more editorial
I guess
directors?
they must have been more like assembling and looking at the footage and putting it together, but it would have been such a different movie if it was the two women in the house.
Yeah.
Like, I think Edie and Edie would have just reacted completely differently because so much of it is about seduction and performance for the man that I just wonder whether that was conscious on the part of the filmmakers or how that decision was made about who was going to be interacting with them.
Yeah.
And I don't know. But.
How would it have been with women filming them? Would there have been rivalries or...
I feel like that's highly possible.
Yeah, because Little Edie, I keep saying Edie, they're all Edies. Little Edie certainly feels like someone who wants her territory and would be offended by someone she didn't think she could seduce.
Yeah.
Think she could
It's
appeal
very
to.
possible.
I feel that's possible.
Because her flirtatiousness, disturbing as it is consistent. Like it is a tactic. She may not be doing it consciously, but she is using a certain set of skills at the camera, which again, I mean, I watched it on this screen and it was enough.
Yeah, I think also there's a certain set of tricks you can play as a woman. You can think you can anyway play on men, versus a woman will see right through that. So, and flirtation is pretty much it's a form of flirtation, but you hear Little Edie just making stuff up, or I don't know. I just feel like if I were her, there's be things I wouldn't confess to a woman because I know she'd know. And maybe that's for the sake of documentary. Maybe that would be interesting, and other things would have been opened up. But definitely, I think it definitely changes it. Who's behind the camera, man or woman? I think absolutely changes what comes out. I think. It's also what we were just talking about in terms of Trump and lies. I mean, it seems also like I wonder how much of this, the folklore of their own lives, they've just repeated because there's so much repetition, so many times that now it's just a truth in their minds. Like how many of these engagements, the story of these several men who are. There's this is a scene where the three of them are billionaires and could have had him. How many times it feels like that's the case. It's just they've repeated it and in this language and in this melody now they're doing it for the camera.
Yeah, it becomes a story. It becomes a legend.
And I, in my own life, I sort of, when that happens with two people, when you go crazy with someone else, that's when it's danger bay, because you got no one else, you go crazy together, then you back up the other's illusion, and it's no good. It's not good. Yeah. But, and even so, even though they don't really leave the house, I mean, she goes down to the beach,
right?
But you don't see anyone around. It really feels like it's them and the gardener and Jerry. Even so, she refuses to wear glasses, so her eyes all messed up because she doesn't like the way it's not stylish.
Right.
And she's worried about her weight all the time. How am I going to keep the weight off?
I'm too close to the ice box. Gotta get out of here.
That ice box.
Too close to the ice box.
Which is really sad. It's really sad. I find that extremely sad that even you'd think that would be the time, this sort of dream scenario for women. Well, you sort of invent this, if when I'm this age and I'm
no one sees me
in the middle of nowhere in a house surrounded by vines, then I can relax.
Right.
Apparently not. When just my mother's there. Only.
Well, but there's cameras and men too.
But I'm sure she thinks about it still.
Oh yeah.
It's sad to me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm coming around on the tragedy side.
I know what you mean, though.
They're haunting themselves in a way, right? They are their own ghosts already. This is what they'll be like forever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the fact that neither of them is lamenting it, makes it somehow. I can see how people would see this as positive, and I don't view it as a comedy, but it feels like it's comforting somehow to watch them continue to function, even if it is on their own limited terms.
Well, I I'm somebody who rewatches movies a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I like, and this is one that I watch. I watch this, and I watch like Altman movies because I find them sort of, if I analyze it, they're kind of similar in that kind of fluid nature. But I watch
activity and emotional volatility.
Yeah, and that they are sort of like a Crystal and Altman movies. There's a lot. There's a lot of different angles. But I watch this as like a comfort. So what does that say? I'll put it on and watch it. Maybe it's because you can kind of dip in and out, but so there's some. I mean, I don't watch it to feel sad. I watch it. I don't know when I.
But isn't that also partly there is a romanticism to it, the language and the scenario there, and something you've seen many times already becomes a comfort. It's
there's something new you find every time in this one. I find.
And there's these moments that are seemingly iconic, like her looking at the scale through the binoculars.
Oh my god.
Or reading the horoscope about the Libra man.
That's right.
And they feel like something. I've also seen the movie many times, but they feel like something that are part of a larger cultural iconography. Even if you see it for the first time, I think it's like, that
it
moment.
does. It feels like
or
an old
dancing.
movie.
Yeah,
feels like, but it's because they're recreating all that.
Yeah,
they've taken from all the things we know, and then are those living images of Hollywood movies and radio and.
Yeah, they're like the book people at the end of Fahrenheit 451. Just people who've memorized one book, and they are the book because the book has been destroyed, and that is their purpose. They're avatars of the 30s, right? The Jazz Age, maybe even.
Yeah, the records.
And the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
There is a level of the kind of upper class American society that they carry in their vocabulary and the way they act that isn't reflective of their actual economic situation.
Yeah. No, I just now made the connection between this film and what Catherine O'Hara is doing in Schitt's Creek, and I can't believe it's taken me that long.
What, you think there's a direct line?
Laura Rose, her affected style of speaking? Yeah, I think so.
Maybe.
I think she's probably, she's certainly seen it.
You got to ask her. Yeah, Have you interviewed Catherine?
A couple of times over the years, yeah. Most
That's
recently
probably
for
true.
Frankenweenie. I wouldn't be surprised, because she's the only one doing it.
And they're in this, kind of shitty old hotel where they're...
Right? Faded
Fallen
glory.
from fortune, and now...
That's funny. Furs.
And she speaks with a...
She does.
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
It's sort of an antiquated Brahmin sort of thing going on. I mean, her speech patterns are absolutely magnificent. They're drawn out. Again, she's playing with vowels and things, but she'll do it with her whole face rather than just speaking.
Yeah.
So there's a reason she's won 4 straight Canadian Screen Awards for this role. But yeah, she's delightful. But now I'm horrified that I missed that because it seems pretty clear to me. I'm bad at my job.
Oh, it makes me want to see. I want to see Kevin here.
Oh yeah, it's on Netflix.
I know.
It's like
if she puts a towel on her head, you'll know.
I don't know.
Or the nylons over the skirt.
Yeah,
with the pants.
How is that?
Under the skirt.
The pants, yeah.
Like that scene.
How is that in any way helpful to people?
But it reminds me of being a little girl.
Take it off and use it as a cape.
As a cape.
Right.
Yeah, it is really
it's playing. It's like kids.
And she refers to it as a costume, not
this is the costume for the day.
Yeah.
It's very hard not to quote her and imitate her.
Yes,
it's
and you
so
never
quotable.
see her without it. I did find myself really scrutinizing it this time just to see if she has hair.
You do see a bit of white.
I couldn't tell if it was a shadow the first time you see her. Yeah.
There's a bit here.
Yeah.
But that.
But she keeps saying, one day my hair will grow back.
Yeah.
But we don't know why.
Is it pica?
No, it's
pica, that disease where you eat your own hair? I'm just trying to figure out if there's some kind of weird inbred thing going on.
Does she have eyelashes?
She does have eyelashes.
She does.
Yeah.
And eyebrows. But maybe she paints them on.
They could definitely be painted. The eyebrows for sure could be painted on.
There's no picture of them.
But she's got eyelashes.
But it's nice that they don't explain. I mean, as a filmmaker, I think it's nice that there's things left unsaid, that they don't draw too many conclusions, because it just leaves it as a kind of document of what exists instead of
It's pretty
making
amazing.
the connections for you.
Like if she did have hair, way less interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah. Just the fact that she has 87 snoods over the course, and I know what a snood is partially because of this and partially because Kate makes them for the winter. But yeah, that's fascinating that these are stylistic choices that will never be explained. It's like an archaeological dig. We just found these people living here. Behold.
It really feels like watching a child. Like when I watch 3-year-old niece, it's like, and this is, it's all facts. And then you put this on top, and then this goes with this, and then that's the outfit for the day. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how grown-ups act, right? That's how a child
Yes.
would think a grown-up would act.
This is the way.
Have you ever seen Jane Campion's first film, Sweetie?
No.
Sweetie, no.
It's very much about this sort of relationship, but it's fictional. It's about two sisters who are both in their ways deeply, deeply broken. One of them is a little Edie, who was encouraged by her parents and doesn't seem to have any actual ability to harness her talent. She does things, but she can't express them in an interesting way. She just performs. And I think her older sister, who's the one who's been thrown over in her parents' affections for this, the monstrous Sweetie, is just this sort of sad sack who inhabits the world but doesn't enjoy anything because she doesn't know how to express emotions other than empty supportive of Sweetie. It's fascinating and horrible, and I'm pretty sure it's on the Criterion Channel, but it's just one of those things where I saw that in a theater with an audience that did not know how to respond to it emotionally.
What made them uncomfortable?
Just it was like sitting for 96 minutes of just discomfort. Like people just clench their bodies inwards
Because of the way she's treating her sister, or because
of the disconnect. I mean, it's a slightly heightened film, and so it's got very bright colors, and I want to say the music is semi-ironically happy, but it's just this miserable family locked in a space where they've deluded themselves, and they're alone with their own delusions. It is the dark version of Grey Gardens, if you can imagine such a thing. But because it's fiction, because it's drama, Campion has the license to just really tease it out and make it as dark and tragic as the Beals refuse to be. Maybe that's why I refuse to see Grey Gardens as a tragedy, because I've already seen the tragic version, but it's a fiction.
When was that made?
88, 89. It's it's been released. I think I saw it, the last time I saw it was when it came out on Blu-ray, so maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but it's just oof. It's a gut punch.
But there is something to that they refuse to go there.
Yeah.
They do remain to the end. They remain optimistic in a very twisted way.
Yeah, no, they remain themselves, right? Like they don't
unapologetic.
They don't crack for the camera.
Yeah.
It's true. They don't break down in any real way.
So this is the weird pivot in the podcast where I ask you guys if there's anything from Grey Gardens that made its way into your work, if you've absorbed or borrowed or referenced or stolen outright anything for what you do.
Not in a stealing way, not directly, but that definitely fed. I mean, the play that we were writing that then became Mouthpiece. So it's not directly in Mouthpiece, but everything we initially made fed into Mouthpiece. That we were trying to find the most extreme kind of push-pull, love-hate, pin you down and push you away relationship. So we did draw from that quite a bit, and we know people have relationships in our lives, people we know who have similar relationships with their mothers or with their daughters. Less extreme, obviously, than this because they live in the real world.
Sure, yeah.
But it's not so. If you essentialize what's going on here, it's not so crazy. You see it all around us. And I don't know the dynamic, obviously, as well with fathers and sons or mothers and sons, but the mother-daughter relationship is fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think also in the film of Mouthpiece, we did really, but I guess those are directly from our lives, not directly from Grey Gardens, but the moments where you're trying your hardest with your daughter or your mother and still goes wrong, or has the exact opposite effect of what you intended it to have, which you see so much here. The kind of, why don't you get married? She can never be a wife. At the same time, that we tried to make very present in the film, because it is such a complex relationship in our experience and in our being in the world with other people, with mothers.
Sure, yeah.
That those layers of kind of, there's a lot of beauty, but there's also a lot of heavy, dark complication going on.
Yeah, the conflict, I mean, I'm sure it's between any parent and child, but it does seem specifically heightened in mothers and daughters. The conflict always seems to be that the person who knows you best is the person you're convinced knows you the least if you're the kid. And if you're the parent, it's simply an endless process of alienation and reconciliation and alienation. I mean, I'm sure I know that's the case with fathers and sons and mothers and sons, but it's just so fraught, and then it's heightened by all the societal expectations, all the roles that you're told you have to assume. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing in Grey Gardens, right? The Beals are acting out the people they think they're supposed to be. It's a performance of status, and it's a performance of I don't know. I don't even know what the other word is. Courtliness, maybe? Some kind of weird. In men, it would be gallantry.
Right.
And in the Beals, it's, they think they're convinced they're being good hosts, right? When they're clearly operating outside
the
any
corn in the bed.
Yeah, but they're trying in their way. To perform this role that's been laid out for them, and I think that in their case, it's got more to do with societal expectations and the whole debutante thing that's long gone now. But
is it long gone?
Oh, I hope so.
It still exists. In its different form.
They probably have them in the South, debutante balls.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mouthpiece, the film, the thing that strikes me about it is how fascinating it is. Like, it's a film about communication from someone who doesn't know what to say. But, I mean, the character, the script clearly knows where it's going, but the way that we're brought into the story and the way that it tells that story is just so powerful and simple, and the visual metaphor is great. And yeah, it's been a while since I've been able to talk about it. And I saw it before TIFF, and then just watched it again a little while ago, and it's, I don't even get to review it. Glenn reviewed it for us, so this is the only chance I have to talk about it.
It just came out today.
But yeah, I'm delighted that it worked out as well as it did, and I'm so glad people get to see it.
We are too.
We are. Yeah. We're excited. It opens tomorrow.
Yeah, and then they can watch Grey Gardens if they want to.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a companion piece.
Did you ever consider performing it in the Beale voices? Just doing Mouthpiece with accents?
Well,
we have because the way that we work, we do through improvisation, and when we also work up at this farm that Amy's family has. It's 3.5 hours away. And I think one day we were sitting in a bed together, and we were just trying to figure out who these characters were, and it was before we knew it was Mouthpiece. And we just went on this improv where we were talking kind of like them. And we have
very similar.
We recorded it on phone.
I have it. It's unlistenable.
It's 3.5 hours.
So embarrassing.
And we were just trying to create material, so it's just us rambling in kind of indie voices. But that never got far.
If anyone ever got hold of this footage, it would be real bad.
Supplemental feature.
Wow.
Commentary track. Just get it out there before someone steals it.
Because it's uncensored and just rambling on and on. You try to find what the different answers of these women, what do they feel about all these different things. And in that search, it's just shut up. Usually people throw out that stuff, but we have it in case there's some gem in there.
So it is a form of hoarding.
Exactly.
Yeah, digital hoarding.
My thanks to Amy Nostbakken and Norah Sadava, co-writers and co-stars of Mouthpiece, which is on screens right now in Toronto and Los Angeles. Check your local listings. Thanks also to Ali Lemaire. She knows what she did. Norah's not on Twitter, but you can find Amy at @Nostbakken, all one word, and you can find Grey Gardens in an invaluable special edition Blu-ray and DVD from the Criterion Collection and streaming on the Criterion Channel. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play, though those services don't throw in the Maisel's 2006 follow-up, The Beals of Grey Gardens. And yeah, if you're on the Criterion Channel, check out Sweetie as well. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.